I was taught never to trust a guy with a bow tie.
I don't know where that came from, but that's in America too. You know, it's one of the things. It comes from the Gilded Age, because that's what separated classes, and people that wore bow ties were, I guess, what we'd call the bourgeois. And so it separated people. But, you know, the bow tie gets a bad rap because why was the bow tie invented in the first place? Do you know?
That's a great question. I don't know.
Well, it's because of the way shirts were made. There was basically no buttons then, and so there would be a V-neck with a collar. Why with a collar? Because you need to close it up and keep yourself warm. And a bow tie was invented to keep the collar closed, and then it became a commodity and a social status. So, I mean, a bow tie has a very utilitarian purpose. It's not used that way today, obviously, but that's what it was, to keep your shirt closed, okay?
I didn't know that. That's fascinating, actually.
Yep.
And do you still do the bow tie old school? You tie it, or do you have the clip-on?
Well, first of all, it's not a clip-on. That is a misnomer. It's called pretied. Okay, and if you'll bear with me just for a second, I have a lot of bow ties, and they're not pre-tied. And this tie is because tomorrow is going to be Victory Day, Dzień Pobieda in Russia, and it's orange and black. It goes to the St. George ribbon that everybody is wearing. If I was wearing a waistcoat or a jacket, I'd be wearing it, but this is what everyone is wearing in Moscow right now. So I'm trying to be in the mood, have the vibe.
Well, that's a great segue. Peter, so take me back. You're American and you ended up in Russia. Take me through that journey. How did you end up in Moscow?
Well, I was an academic before all of this, and I studied modern European history with a emphasis on Eastern Europe and Russia, which really, you know, in the early day when I started in academia in the early 80s, there were a small group of hardcore Eastern Europeanists, but most people studied Italy, you know, Spain, Portugal, warm places where you can go to. Okay, obviously, study of the UK is very popular in the United States. So to get a little bit of competitive edge, I started doing Eastern Europe and went to Poland in 1981. At that time, it was martial law when the Solidarity Trade Union was shut down by the communist government. And that was really one of the most, it was a real benchmark in my life because I'd never really been outside of the United States before. And it was so enlightening for me just how different other places are. And, you know, and for someone that was brought up from the age of 5 to 15 in a suburb of Denver, Colorado, going to Eastern Europe, going to Poland, was really something that really made me grow and made me learn. And it was that stage in my life that I started questioning a lot of things that I'd been taught. And I've been on that trajectory ever since. I did, yeah, you know that. And then I did graduate work in it. And I must say, when there was a certain point where the trajectory of my academic endeavors kind of made me into a kind of an expert on Eastern European communist regimes. Well, between 1989 and 1991, they were all gone. So, I went from kind of a historian to a political scientist in a way, because then at that point it's all about EU integration, it's all about NATO expansion, which I'm against both, and left academia. There were no prospects for me. Being a white guy didn't help. Let's be honest, okay? And at the time, I didn't really begrudge it. I said, "No, that's the pendulum of history." Okay, I guess that's okay. I didn't take it very personally. And then before I left academia, I had a 2-year Fulbright scholarship to Poland. So during those 2 years, I kind of got the lay of the land, because I was, in the back of my mind, I was thinking I'm going to probably stay here for a lot longer than just my 2 years. And that's what happened. I went back and I started working. I went from academia I worked for Colgate-Palmolive and did consumer research on toothbrushes, toothpaste, shampoo, shower gels. And because of my character, my nature, I thought, well, if this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to do it well. And I actually, to this day, I go to a supermarket or a shopping mall. I look at all of the marketing. I like marketing. I'm very interested in how people pitch things and messaging, and that goes from shampoo to ideas. Obviously, it's not a big jump, really. Okay, then at one point, I ended up working for a financial services company as an editor, and it was a company that had obviously Poles, because it was in Warsaw, Americans, Brits, Australians, other Eastern Europeans, some Czechs, some Slovaks, Hungarians, and I became I went from editor to a financial analyst, and I didn't really particularly like it, but it made a whole lot more money. And after doing that for a stint, my American boss in this company, he moved to Moscow and he said, "Come along." And that was in 1998. And I remember that it was in the internet. We did have the internet, but people still used fax machines. And he faxed me a contract, and I thought, how can I say no? And I was quite Russophobic at that time. Being an Eastern Europeanist in American academia, it's almost a default position to be Russophobic. So what was my thinking? Well, what they were offering, do that for 2 or 3 years, and put some money in the bank. Then you can just decide the next step. It was just a means to an end. I had no intention of staying here at all. And when I came here in early 1998, it was, gangster land. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, it was really insane. I mean, there was kind of an appeal because, wow, this is really screwed up. This is a really screwed up place, okay? And so it was, kind of being a voyeur about other people's suffering. And, that was, a curiosity for me. And plus my academic background was always kicking in, because when I came here, I met other foreigners, but they knew nothing about Russia, and I knew a lot about Russia. Okay, so going down the street and you see a statue of Mayakovsky or Tchaikovsky or these cultural icons. I mean, I was familiar. It was odd. It wasn't foreign to me. I mean, okay, maybe I'm seeing the statue, but I have read all of his books. So that transition wasn't so hard for me, and I, quickly kind of learned to appreciate it. Then the financial crash came. I was working for Alpha Bank, and they gave a generous severance package, and so I had a golden parachute to kind of stick around, and I started working in journalism, and then in 2005, RT started, and the rest is history, as they say.
Crosstalk.
Yeah.
And you've been hosting Crosstalk ever since?
Yeah, I've been hosting Crosstalk for 15 years.
The problem that I have with this is you're such a pleasant guy, and your show is called Crosstalk. You don't look cross at all.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because it was designed to be a debate program. But essentially, what it has been, essentially since the beginning, it's a critique of Western narratives about all kinds of things. And ever since the coup in Kiev in 2014, the news came to me. I mean, in the early years, we would do like, should there be a fat tax? Was Jesus really a Christian? Should there was that whole debate, the dot triple X, should there be all porn should be put into one domain, and we were doing stuff like that, and kind of like Jerry Springer stuff, and then the world came crashing down on us. The Georgian invasion of South Ossetia in August 2008, and then the Syria dirty war, and so it just kind of invaded us. And I just embraced it. I said, "Hey, let's just do this, okay?" And so instead of being a debate program, it's a big tent for people that are contrarian to American and Western foreign policy and Western ideologies, too. I mean, we get a lot of dissidents, some very, very interesting people, some really far out people. But it is a place, it's a big tent for the contrarians to show up.
How do you view the U.S. now?
It's a very alien place to me. Okay, I was brought up in a very conservative environment, like I said, from the age of 5 to 15 in a suburb of Denver, Colorado. Everybody was conservative, and if you're cutting up like smoking a cigarette or getting into a fight after school, by the time you got home, somebody had called your mom. You know what I mean? Like, that's how it worked, okay? You didn't need police. You didn't need truant officers. Moms and grandmom ran the place, okay? Because they'd be looking out the curtain like, what's going on out there, okay? And then I'm going to call across the street because you're cutting up. And then when you get home, well, you get home, okay? And then there were consequences. Then we moved to California, and the weather's nice and there's a lot of institutions, but I hated living there because I didn't like the people. I didn't like the vibe.
Do you see the US as a sinking ship, or is it just rudderless?
I think it's rudderless and sinking, and I think it's a danger to the world, a big danger. You have to step out of it. I mean, you have an outside view living in South Africa. The United States is seen as a very aggressive country around the world. I mean, there's this nonsense about. I'm not against tariffs. Okay, don't get me wrong, but this approach. I mean, this is insanity. This is. It's not scoring any points for the United States around the world. And it's because it's a crumbling empire. And when empires start to crumble, they lash out. Okay, they look for the magic bullet to solve the problem of the contraction and all of that. And we've together with our colleague John Laughlin, we've talked about Brics and stuff like. On Monday it can be skeptical. On Tuesday I'm a little bit more enthusiastic, but it's a reality, and it's an answer to American/Western hegemony. And so, it's not the beacon of light for the future, that's for sure. And it's just going. And as the American power declines relatively, it will lash out even more. So, people, Peter, what do you miss about America? I don't miss anything at all.
But are you able to travel there? I mean, you're a Russian citizen now.
Well, I'm still an American citizen also.
Oh, okay.
But I have both. But my American passport has expired, and because of the breakdown during the Biden administration of U.S.-Russia relations, there's no consulate here for me to get it renewed. And I don't think they would renew it if I had asked. I mean, a lot of people don't understand is that the U.S. government cannot take an American citizenship away, but they don't have to give you a passport. Okay, there's no obligation for them. Okay, so Just because of work and whatnot, and plus, obviously, I would fear for my own personal freedom if I visited a NATO country. So that's kind of off the board for maybe for the rest of my life. Okay, but other travel, yeah. But I'll be honest with the viewers. I have to check about extradition. I have to, you know. I have a family. I have dogs. I have property. I'm not going to. I'm not. Those are not trifles to me.
Did you at any point come to my side of the pond? Were you ever on the African continent?
Well, Egypt, but I don't really think of I think
It's
of
sort
that
of Africa.
Yeah, so I mean, in a strict technical sense, yes, but I mean, I think most of us think of the Arab north of the continent, where the desert is. Okay.
Yes, Egypt is more Middle East.
Yeah, exactly. No, so no, I haven't. No, I don't know Africa.
Well, thankfully, because we're both Brics countries, you shouldn't have any issues visiting South Africa. Hopefully you will.
Well, I would actually, I would very much like that. But before COVID, I had these grand ambitions and plans, and I wanted to do is I wanted to go to do a series of crosstalk programs in every single BRIC country, and it was being entertained, and they kind of liked the idea. Okay, and then COVID came, and then COVID suddenly came to an end. No one has explained to me why, but it suddenly came to an end. And then the next turbulence, and that was the Ukraine conflict. So, and I've because of that, I've just been swamped. And then after October 7th, what happened in Israel-Palestine, that has also been a really pressing and absorbing issue. So. For about a 6-month period there, I would tell my producers, Tuesday Ukraine, Thursday Palestine, and that's what we did over and over and over again. Which I think is, I feel obligated because Western coverage of Ukraine is abysmal. Every once in a while, they'll kind of pull the curtain, like this New York Times story about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, about what the CIA and the Pentagon is doing in Ukraine from the very beginning, and then the reporting on what's going on in Palestine, which is a genocide and it's a crime of our time. And the consequences, I will never. There'll be consequences certainly for the rest of my life, and I think it's a condemnation of the West and its behavior. It makes up all these rules and demands people follow them, but it doesn't follow its own. And that is one of the big outcomes of this: is the absolute rank hypocrisy of the West, and people see it all over the world.
You might have made a Freudian slip there, but it was quite profound. So I'm going to quickly bring you back to that. You said BRIC countries and you left out the S. Now that is, but that's a good point because South Africa is the smallest of the BRICS region. Do you think South Africa will have a role to play in the future?
Long story short, if it has better governance, of course. I'll even go much further. Better governance, and South Africa will become one of the great powers easily.
Particularly because of our geographical positioning.
And then you're just the natural endowment. I mean, you guys got a lot going for you. Okay, it's a governance issue, and
yes.
And I look forward to that because it's very, very rich and rich in every single way. And we need South Africa to be that way. We need, the world needs a better, stronger, self-confident South Africa. It's very important.
Let's just stay on BRICS for a moment. You were alluding to multipolarity when you were talking about the US earlier. Do you think BRICS is going to go somewhere?
Yes. And but it's going to go a different path. First of all, there's not going to be a leader of BRICS. It's going to have to be very democratic. Okay, and I think what it needs to do is what a lot of people want it to be. They want it to be an anti-Western alliance or grouping and all that. That's unnecessary. It's
Yeah.
unnecessary. BRICS doesn't have to be against anything. BRICS has to be for lots of things, okay? But they need, one of the things I would like to see is a BRICS communications node. How do I learn about South Africa? Through Western media. How do you learn about Russia? Through Western media. And I was at a BRICS conference, I guess, really, what was it, maybe 8 years ago? And in Beijing, and that was my calling card. Because I'm the South African delegation, we had the Indians and the Chinese, and I'm just saying, it was kind of pointed at the Chinese a little bit, like, you guys got more money than God. I mean, let's get a BRICS Bloomberg going on here, okay? But those are kind of things. I mean, in Kazan last year, there was a big BRICS confab, and they were talking about, a BRICS currency and all that. No, that's not going to happen for a long time. It's not, okay? Because that gets into centralization and all that. What the BRICS' strength is that it is diverse, and there has to be some very basic buckets of agreement. But when you try to institutionalize it, head of this and all of that, it'll slow it down. BRICS is a feeling, and it is a outlook. And I think we can fill it in as we go along. It's not press anything. Let's not force anything. And certainly let's not look at it as an anti-Western alliance. Because I know people that like BRICS, they say, this is our way to fight the Americans and all that. No. The Americans and Western Europe, they're going down all by themselves. Russia doesn't have to meddle in their elections, okay? Because they're fundamentally anti-democratic. These elites, the current elites, are so fundamentally anti-democratic, they're going to create their own demise. Nobody needs to push them. Nobody.
But isn't BRICS also a response to NATO?
No, not necessarily, because BRICS wisely stays away from the security military dimension. That's very wise. Okay, look, countries like China and Russia, they don't have it's part of their constitutions, if I can use that in air quotes, is not to join military alliances. Okay, now, Russia and China have extensive military cooperation, but there is no Article 5 in the Russia-Chinese relationship, and I don't think it should be. Okay, these countries have faced Western imperialism for 500 years. They prize their sovereignty. They really, the West doesn't even know what that word means anymore. Okay, but as Russians are celebrating the anniversary of defeating fascism 80 years ago, but that's not the first time. Okay, Napoleon, and his Western coalition tried to dismantle Russia. Hitler and his coalition tried to dismantle Russia, and those coalitions get bigger and bigger because during the Napoleonic time, the U.S. wasn't part of that. During the Hitlerian coalition, the United States was on the side of Russia. Now we have the collective West. It gets worse and worse for Russian security through time. Okay, that's why they prize their sovereignty so much, and they're not going to make a commitment to another country's security. They'll work really closely. Look, for example, with the relationship that Russia has with Iran. For the kind of security and military relationship they have, it's written into the documents that Iran must remain a non-nuclear weapon country. Okay, they must respect the NPT, and so Russian diplomacy is so much more sophisticated and detail-driven. These bozos that come flying in, like Keith Kellogg or Witkoff and all that. I mean, they're all amateurs. They're hard to take seriously, and that's why worldwide the Russians are widely respected. You may not like Russia, but their statecraft, their diplomacy is quite sophisticated.
What is the West?
I've made programs about that.
Give me the summary.
You can go geographically. The origins of the West would, in 21st century parlance, is the Christianity, the Christian world. Right now, it's where neoliberalism has dominion. And this is what brings these elites together. It's really remarkable. If you look at the European elites now, they're all cookie cutter replacements for another. If you took the prime minister from Lithuania and switched it out for the prime minister in France, no one would notice. No one would know. Maybe it would be a fashion statement, okay, because all of these elites are making fashion statements all of the time. They don't have anything important to say or interesting to say whatsoever. And that is because their minds have been colonized by neoliberal ideology. And so where there's neoliberalism, there's a pretty strong case to say you're in the West. Okay, this could apply to Japan and Australia and all of that. Are they part of the Western world when it comes to a mindset? Obviously, and the Western world is also defined by its relationship with the United States.
Yeah, that's actually quite true. But when we speak about the West imploding, Peter, what do we mean?
Well, first of all, its own self. They're not self-sufficient anymore. They cannot use the tools of neo-colonialism as they have in the past. I mean, over the last 2 years, look what's happened to the French in Africa. I mean, pretty a good swift kick to the ass. Okay, that's what they've gotten. In many ways, Russia has replaced them. That's more rhetorical than anything else. I mean, that's a way for African elites to stick it to the French after hundreds of years of colonialism and neo-colonialism. Russia is very, very careful. It's not the Soviet Union. It doesn't spend a lot of money on this kind of foreign aid and all that. No, that's not. Russia is not interested in that. Russia is a status quo power. It wants to keep what it has, essentially. Okay, but the West is in decline because it doesn't believe in itself anymore. It doesn't believe in the people. That's for sure. Okay, look what they did in Romania. Oh, we don't like that guy. You have to have another election. Well, that's a real sovereign choice, isn't it? Wow. And then you have this Moldova, an aspirant to become part of the European Union. In their last election, they had because Moldova is a very, very poor country, had very bad governance. Moldovans live all over the world. There's a lot of Moldovans in Western Europe. There's a lot in Russia. Oh, they had polling stations all through Europe for Moldovans. They had one polling station in Russia where, there are hundreds of thousands of Moldovans. Oh, they don't get to vote. They completely disenfranchised those people, and it tilted the out. And it was like razor thin. I mean, this was razor thin. And if they had allowed the Russian diaspora, the Moldovan diaspora in Russia to vote, it would have gone a different way. But, we won. We declared victory by the most undemocratic means. And now they have ADF in Germany, AfD in Germany, being outlawed. It's the most popular party in Germany by public opinion polls, but they're going to outlaw it. So, I mean, is that the West? Because that's what the West is to me. Referenda in Europe on the European Union treaties. Oh, the people voted against it, but Parliament will pass it. Well, then why did you have the referendum? We see this over and over and over again. And so the West is a group of elites in a pecking order. I mean, if you look at the military. Every single NATO country, they have their cadre sent to institutions in the United States. They study at this war college and all of that. I mean, they reproduce themselves. And so, it's not Annalena Baerbock, the foreign minister. I think she's still currently the foreign minister. Maybe in the next few days after the coalition is voted in. But she said, I don't care what my voters think. We're going to be pro-Ukraine. Well, that's an archetype for Western leadership today.
And then adding to that, you've got EU policy that is, whether by design or emergence, I don't know, but they are actively destroying Europe. I mean, you have a mass immigration crisis there.
Absolutely. I mean, you can have your opinion on Gaddafi, but he made it very clear. He said, "You take me out, and you will rue the day," because they're just going to cross the Mediterranean, and so yeah, I mean, their whole energy policy. Again, this Frederick Merz that finally passed the bar and became chancellor. And you have this Queen Ursula over at the European Commission. We will cut all reliance on Russian energy. Yay! At what cost? I came up with this about a year ago. We used to say future historians will explain why this or that happened. But no, we've got that wrong. Future psychologists we need psychologists to explain why. What drives a nation state's elites to self-harm? This is self-harm. Okay, and again, where is the democratic dimension to all of this? It's just not there. I mean, they want to cancel the people because they failed.
Can it be pulled back?
I don't think so. No. Look, in this large scheme of things, empires coming up, Western dominance of the world is about 500 years. Every single empire comes to an end. There's no end of history. Okay, and this is what neoliberalism believes, that history is ended, and we must maintain the status quo because there's nothing. We've already reached the pinnacle of human experience. Well, that's nonsense. Okay, and this is like look at the terms we hear in the media all the time. The rise of China. Well, they don't look at it that way. The return of China to its natural place in the world. Not an aggressive China. China's not an aggressive, doesn't have a history of aggression. You know why? Because they do what's called the demonstration effect. People will come to us. People will want to be in our orbit. People will kowtow, okay? Because we are an exemplar of the human condition at that time. And so, we don't need to send flotillas around the world and conquer. No, the world comes to us. We are the middle kingdom. We're in the middle. And this is what they believe. You can disagree with it, it's fine, okay? But this is their mythology, their imagined community about themselves. And then, with Trump's trade war with everybody, yeah, well, Vietnam and the Philippines and Indonesia, well, let's sit down and talk to the Chinese. Let's see, they're more reasonable people, okay? And that's it. People are looking toward, and China doesn't export its ideology. Okay, you can emulate us if you want, but we're not going to force it on you. That's antithetical to what the West did for 500 years. Still does.
Yeah, and another interesting observation is the Chinese have a history of playing the long game, very long game.
Yeah, well, they don't. In our case, it's the election cycle, and if you look at the United States, it's every 2 years. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. There isn't. Maybe there's a 1 month break, a hiatus of 1 month when people aren't talking about the next midterms. Okay. Maybe after the midterms for a month they take a break, then they're thinking about the next one. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, and plus we have their Western elites because so much of it is tied to special private interests. I mean, and look at to be a politician in Europe and the United States. These are wealthy people. I mean, how many people in the British Parliament have any idea what working class people, what their existence is like? There was this woman, Cori Bush. I think she was from Missouri. She was, she came from poverty. Okay, I mean, before she was elected, I mean, she, I think was facing bankruptcy or something. At the very least, extreme financial hardship, and she goes to Congress. I mean, she there's no one that understands her class whatsoever. Okay, and she took a noble position on Israel-Palestine, and they got rid of her in one of the most expensive congressional races. AIPAC and others just outspent her and they got their puppet in office. But if you go through all through your, I mean, look at von der Leyen. She comes from a very wealthy family, and she married very well. Okay, I mean. You can make the case, and I think there are cases in the past. I mean, you had like Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I mean, he was a patrician. He came from very nice money, pampered existence. But every once in a while, the system generates someone that is so unexpected. He actually sympathized with the working people. My father's family were always dyed-in-the-wool Republicans, okay? They hated Franklin Roosevelt because he was a class traitor, okay? But these people in power now, they don't betray their class. They can't even imagine it, okay? Look at, this is what's reported. I'm not the source for this, okay? But, Steve Witkoff, the guy that is Trump's envoy to Russia and Iran, no official American. He's not employed by the U.S. government. He wasn't confirmed by anyone. He's just Donald Trump's friend, and so Witkoff's son and Donald Trump's son, Don Jr. They were apparently entrained to the Middle East when Witkoff was dealing when he went to Oman. Well, the sons of two major power brokers, they were making deals, huge multi-million-dollar, tens of billions of dollar deals. Here they go. They use their status, their power, and so people, Hunter Biden nickeled and dimed it. They were the ragtag sellers of influence. It looks like Witkoff and Don Jr. They do it on a grand scale. See, this is the problem. This is is there a social good involved? Is there a social a good that we want to create? There's no vision. It's like it's my turn to pile in. It's my time to collect. Okay. We pose the question: what is the West? Well, but I think if you look at where places that we would nominally think is the West, what do you see? You see replicas of Roman architecture, the arcs and the pillars and all that. You see, Okay. Well, a lot of it's still in Europe. Okay. And if you look at American architecture of the turn of the 19th, 20th century, Rome was the inspiration. And so why am I bringing this up? And I'm going to answer your question. Is a clown show? Yeah, it's bread and circuses. That's what it is. Immigration is a huge problem in the United States, but it was designed to be a problem. Okay, this was something in the making for decades, and now there's finally a political figure that wants to push back. But what is he selling? We will find you. Well, that doesn't help people. Does it make you feel, oh yeah, they got him, they sent him out, yay? But the price of gasoline is the same. The price of food is the same. And that's the circus part. They have this, and what we have is a conservative woke culture right now. Yeah. Because I'm the victim. I'm the victim. Yay! They got rid of another guy. They sent him to El Salvador. Well, yeah. But how does that make your life better? How does it make the country better? What does it do with the rule of law? And I'm for even very extreme measures if necessary, but you have to do it within the law, because then you short circuit the whole thing. And so, it's a hang on for the ride, because that's going to be the substitute for substantive changes over the next 3 to 6 months. The U.S. economy can be turned upside down. And
because of the
political
tariffs.
implications of it. Because, I maybe like you, I've listened to hundreds of hours of what's going to happen, okay? I'm not going to say I have any particularly special knowledge, but it looks kind of grim. And how are you going to sell that to your people? Oh, we got rid of these, and we sent these guys to a supermax in El Salvador. That's not going to be enough, okay? It's not. So it's bred in circuses, and we'll see how long that can last. I mean, it's something that's unsustainable. Donald Trump is not going to reindustrialize the United States with these policies. The people that could do it, you know me well enough. I consider myself conservative. I believe in personal freedoms. I'm not a big fan of government. But what Donald Trump should have done with his mandate, he should have been FDR. He said, we're going to have to spend our way out of this mess. We're going to have to reindustrialize this country, or we're just going to lose it. And if you want to be a strong man, as I say, authoritarian, then start leaning on the rich, okay? They have to. You become fabulously rich. Your great-great-grandchildren won't be able to spend the amount of money that you've been able to hoard. Now you have to step up and save the country. That's not going to happen. In no way it's going to happen. Okay. At the end of the day, this is my prediction. After 4 years of Trump, the 1% will probably double, triple their value.
But what happens after Trump?
Well, reaction, then another reaction. It is a deeply divided country, but again, that's part of the bread and circuses. Yeah, it's all kind of a parlor game for the people with power. Yet Trump is keeping the peasants preoccupied. That's a good thing, okay? I mean, if it doesn't impact their bottom line, then what interest do they have? If the status quo can be maintained.
He goes onto Twitter. I don't know if you saw, and he tells the whole world not to buy oil. Is it from Iran? How does he think this is going to play out?
Well, people feel good about it. See, he's being a leader. He's being strong. Okay, and the narrative that China is a threat. I mean, we've seen that the CCP over and over and over again. China. Yeah. It's as I've said to one of my to a talk show host in China. I said, "Now it's your turn." They're shifting their attention. What that will do is, China is the major importer of Iranian oil. The Chinese are not going to pay attention to what Trump has to say. But the rest of the world will say, well, why do you get to dictate the terms and conditions of global trade? It made you rich. Why can't we become rich? Okay, so, I mean, it's like India. They looked at what happened. Germany became the economic powerhouse, the industrial powerhouse of Europe. Why? Well, because they're Germans. Culture is very important. They're very industrious people, very good work ethic. As I like to show people, I collect Mont Blanc pens. I love German technology, precision, instruments. And the Indians say, well, we'll do the same thing. We got smart people. But we need cheap energy, because that's how the German economic miracle came about. Cheap energy. That was the most important ingredient. And so now the Americans, don't you import Russian energy? Well, no, we're going to do the same thing the Europeans did. They don't want to do it anymore. I mean, and then you know what? The Russians will we'll buy crude oil from the Russians. We'll refine it in our nice new refineries. There's no new refineries in the West, okay? But India has them. We'll refine it and we'll sell it to the Europeans at a 500% markup. Okay, I mean, everybody knows this is happening. The Europeans knows. No, they know what this is happening. See, that's why I said we're going to need psychologists to explain to us this mindset.
What do you think the world is going to look like in 250 years' time? Europe, United States? Russia?
That's a little too far out. Let's say 100 years.
Let's say 100 years.
Okay. What is happening right now, I think, is only going to accelerate. We're going to go back to the great power competition that we saw that went all the way up into the 19th and early 20th centuries. So what 100 years from now, we will look at the period of 1945 to 2015, as an anomaly, a huge anomaly, because you had the most powerful parts of the world that were informed by an ideology. Well, geopolitics is very rarely informed by ideology. It can play a role, but I think it's negligible, okay? Because great powers have interests, they don't have friends. But neoliberalism says our friends and our values are far more important than power calculations, which is absolutely nonsense, okay? Because you make huge mistakes. See, the United States, because of its largesse, can make huge foreign policy mistakes and still move on, but you can't do it forever. Okay, American dominance of the world will be questioned if we leave Indochina. Well, that didn't happen. Okay, Iraq catastrophe, Afghanistan catastrophe. Did it affect the average American? They were probably vaguely aware of it. Okay, but going toe to toe with Russia with this proxy war in Ukraine, then people start feeling it, particularly with energy prices. So I think we're just going to go back to a very dog-eat-dog world of just geopolitical posturing. Is that a better world? Probably not, okay? Will avoid us going into nuclear war? Probably. See, to solve the security problems in the Middle East, Iran should have a nuclear weapon. That will kind of even the playing field, okay? But that's great power politics. It's not like, should the mullahs have a nuclear weapon? No, should the nation state of Iran have a nuclear weapon? Also, in 100 years, we'll see a pattern. We have Chinese, Han civilization. We have the Persian civilization. We have the Russian civilization. Okay, Europe decided to get rid of that. Okay, so Europe will just be the western tip of Asia. Maybe in 100 years we won't even call it Europe anymore. It'll be the western tip of Asia. Okay, because they have made that decision. But what I'm saying is that history has a way of not repeating itself, but kind of repairing trends that have been as old as a millennia, okay? And so this interregnum for 1945, my arbitrary 2015, will just be seen as an oddity. That's also the experiment with democracy. Will democracy play a big role in 100 years? I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so.
I think it's on its way out also.
I do too.
I mean, there's no reason why you need to keep changing the leadership every 4 or 5 years.
Look, an American academic who really dislikes me a lot, because he's a big democracy guy, and he made a career out of it. And he asked me, he said, "What about Russian democracy?" And I said, "Well, what about it?" He said, "Well, what do you think the state of it is?" And I said, "Well, ask most Russians. They'll say, yeah, I'm for democracy if it works. I'm for democracy if it generates results." Okay? Other than that, I don't think about it. That's not a topic of conversation. What is the topic of conversation? I want to make sure I have a future for my children. Okay? Kind of like to take a vacation once in a while. It's good that we have health care. Speaking of health care, I had an eye surgery a week and a half ago. It was kind of a serious thing. It was an emergency. And in the hospital, Jeremy, what did I see? Working class people, elderly people. It was everybody. It was a very good, excellent institution. The bedside manner was wonderful. It wasn't elitist. It wasn't a special hospital for the rich or anything like that. No, I have insurance, and my insurance is accepted there. But if you don't, you're still going to get the same treatment because you're a citizen, and a lot of these people were pensioners, and So they would, what's important to them is healthcare. If I were to start, sitting there in the waiting room and say, well, what do you think about democracy? And they'd say, I'm not sure what you're talking about, young man, but I'm glad we have this. Democracy is a Western fetish. It's a fetish, okay? Because most of the world looks at it as a procedure. It's not a fetish. It's not an ideology. And that's why most of the world just scratch their heads. It's like, what are you talking about? We have turned it into a fetish that works against the interests of the vast majority of people whose elites fetishize it. Okay, and, everything is legitimate because it was democratically elected. Well, I mean, if the democratic choice is so limited, I mean, the Overton window is like that. I mean, no, it's a fetish to legitimize the current power structures and relations. That's not, in my mind, democracy.
I'd like a nugget of wisdom from you, Peter.
It's too vague. Look, we live in very perilous times. I think we'll get through it, but at great cost. What I think is that we have to abandon a lot of these pieties that we're indoctrinated with. Okay, and I think a lot more self-awareness. My generation, I'm at the end of the boomer generation. I'm one of the last boomers. We really fucked up the world. Sorry for the language. Okay, we don't need another generation of boomers because they were very selfish. They were narcissistic. They, look at the identitarian politics. Being the Identity Project replaced looking for redemption, saving our souls. Okay, we forgot all about those things. We want gratification, but we don't want absolution. And that's where Western liberalism just short-circuited humanity, put us on a very, very bad trajectory. And the good thing is, I think most of the world see that and say, you've got nice little gimmicks, make life a little bit easier. But Westernization and modernization, they're not the same thing. We'll take the modernization. You keep your stuff to yourself, okay? We'll watch your kind of fetishes on Netflix, but you keep it there. We are not really interested in this because we're not interested in your identitarian project. Because at the end of the day, why do we have society? Why was the idea of society invented and practiced? To protect the vulnerable and to promote the very best of us. Okay, one of the worst things that came out of Western culture is that all men were created equal. That's nonsense. It's not true. I'm not Einstein. I'm not Tchaikovsky. Okay? I'm not Rachmaninoff. We're not all equal. But a society that looks for the social good can promote the best of us while at the same time protecting the most valuable. That's what society is. It's not, how I get ahead of everybody else. That leads to a dead end.
All right, Peter, how can I follow you?
Well, everybody knows I'm quite notorious. I'm at RT. My program is called Crosstalk. I'm on what used to be called Twitter. It's a PL Crosstalk. You can follow me there. I'm very proud and happy that I do a podcast with you and John Laughlin, a Forum in Friends, which is catching on, and I find it very stimulating. And I do a podcast with my friend George Samueli. It's called The Gaggle. YouTube is quite cruel to us, but George is very energetic on the locals page. So I keep myself busy, but I'm much more interested in listening to others before I comment. That's one thing, again, a new thing that we should all do is listen more.
Peter Lavelle, thank you for joining me in the trenches.